You don't belong here anymore.
The room was too bright for what was about to happen. Sunlight flooded through the glass wall, glinting off polished tables and the chrome frame of the company logo. Warren Bishop stood at the head of the boardroom, his tone smooth, confident, the kind that made people sit straighter. "Today marks a new era for Silver Pathways," he announced, smiling as cameras clicked. "We're here to celebrate progress and those ready to lead it." My name appeared on the screen. Trent Callahan, 50, Director of Operations, 15 years of service. Applause broke out around the table. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and walked toward the podium. I thought this was my promotion, the one Warren had hinted at last month when he called me the bridge between old and new. If you've ever been in a moment that tested everything you've worked for, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want to see how this story unfolds, make sure to subscribe and stay with me until the end. For 15 years, I had been part of this company's spine. I'd started as a care facility coordinator, back when Silver Pathways was just 2 small homes and a handful of nurses. My work was simple then: keep the residents safe, the families informed, and the staff proud of what they did. I rose through the ranks because I understood that elder care wasn't a business model. It was a promise. But Warren Bishop, the new CEO, saw things differently. Younger, ambitious, obsessed with investor charts, he believed empathy slowed efficiency. To him, the people we served were clients, not lives. His tone shifted. 15 years, he said, glancing at the paper in his hand. A remarkable run. But sometimes, holding on too long keeps others from stepping forward. We need leaders who know when to let go. Silence fell. The air conditioning hummed louder than usual. I looked down at my silver watch, its face scratched from years of hallway rounds. It was a gift from my first resident, Mrs. Ellis, who once told me, "Time is only cruel if you let it decide who you are." I met Warren's eyes. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for the clarity." He smiled, unsure if it was sarcasm or surrender. The meeting moved on, but something inside me had already shifted. The ticking beneath my cuff grew louder, steady, and deliberate. I packed slowly, the way you do when your mind lags behind your hands. My office looked smaller now: bare walls, an empty bookshelf, a thin layer of dust where the photo frames used to sit. 15 years reduced to a single box, a nameplate, a few files, and a silver watch ticking softly on the desk. The calmness didn't feel real. It was the kind that comes only when the pain hasn't caught up yet. I'd seen this room in every phase: late nights, staff briefings, moments when hope and exhaustion blurred into one, when the flu epidemic hit 12 years ago. The board wanted to close half the facilities to cut costs. I was the one who fought to keep them open. I slept in those hallways for 6 nights, treating residents alongside the nurses until the outbreak passed. We saved over 100 patients. And the company's reputation. Silver Pathways didn't fall apart back then because I refused to let it. I ran my hand across the desk one last time. Outside the window, the Denver skyline shimmered against a cold morning haze. For a brief moment, I almost felt proud. Then the memory of Warren Bishop's smirk during the meeting returned, his words clean, polite, surgical. "We need leaders who know when to let go." I'd mentored him once, back when he was just a financial analyst struggling to understand why compassion didn't fit neatly on a spreadsheet. I covered for his mistakes during a failed acquisition. I even defended him to the board when they wanted him gone, and now he'd replaced me with a smile. A soft knock broke the silence. A young nurse stepped in, Emily, one of the first I'd trained. Her eyes were red. "They told us not to come by," she said, voice shaking. "But I wanted to thank you. You taught me how to talk to patients like they were my own parents for the first time that morning." I smiled. "That's all this job ever was," I said quietly. She nodded, then turned away quickly before her tears showed. The door clicked shut, leaving only the faint hum of the servers and the tick of my silver watch. I listened to it for a long moment. The sound was steady, one of the few things that hadn't changed. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting another condolence text or empty platitude. Instead, A familiar female voice filled the line, calm, precise, professional. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "are you ready for the ownership confirmation meeting?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the room one last time, taking in the silence, the emptiness, the stillness before a shift. Then I replied, softly, "Yes, I'm ready." Across town, Warren Bishop was signing a new partnership contract, his pen gliding across the page, cameras flashed. He had no idea whose name was printed at the top of the acquisition papers, no idea that everything he thought he controlled was already slipping quietly into my hands. 1 week later, the company I had built my life around was being reborn without me. The press conference filled every local network, streaming live from Silver Pathway's gleaming new headquarters. The headline across the screen read, "A New Era Begins." I watched from a small cafe on Colfax Avenue, a place I used to visit with the staff during late shifts. The air smelled of burnt espresso and rain on concrete, on television. Warren Bishop stood behind the podium, smiling like he had discovered fire. Cameras flashed. He spoke with the same easy arrogance that had once passed for charm. "We honor the legacy that brought us here," he said, "but progress demands we leave the past behind. Silver Pathways will move forward unburdened by outdated systems and outdated thinking." Behind him, a digital slide listed founding contributors. My name had always been there, Trent Callahan, third from the top, between two of the original board members, but as the list rolled, I saw the blank space where it used to be. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from something quieter and heavier. The barista glanced at the screen, then at me. "You worked there, right?" she asked softly. I nodded. "A long time ago." Outside the window, a bus passed, reflecting my face across the glass, older, calmer, almost detached. I turned the silver watch on my wrist, tracing the scratches along its edge. Its second hand ticked in rhythm with the broadcast applause. Warren's voice cut through again. "Silver Pathways will now partner with Haven Bridge Foundation, our new strategic investor committed to innovation and community." The cafe's television zoomed in on the new logo, a pale blue bridge stretching over a silver arc. I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. Warren had no idea what he had just announced. The Haven Bridge Foundation wasn't new. It had been quietly acquiring assets across the elder care sector for years, designed to protect ethical facilities from corporate gutting. I helped build it piece by piece, silently, through people who still believed compassion had value. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had erased my name from one wall only to plaster my creation on another, around me. The cafe buzzed with normal life cups clinking, phones ringing, laughter cutting through the hum. I sat perfectly still, watching Warren sell my work as his vision. My reflection stared back at me, patient, composed. When the broadcast ended, I finished my coffee and stood. The pain was still there, dull but clean, tempered into purpose. I checked the time, 11:45 a.m. The second hand of my watch clicked once, then again, steady as breath, for the first time in weeks. I smiled, quietly, deliberately. The game had already started. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the Haven Bridge Foundation's downtown office. The building wasn't impressive, no marble floors, no polished brass nameplates, just a quiet suite on the 5th floor above a small law firm. I liked that. Real work didn't need glass walls or taglines. Inside, the lights were soft, the air smelled faintly of old paper and coffee grounds, and the people waiting around the table were faces I hadn't seen in years. They were the founders, the ones who'd built Silver Pathways long before Warren Bishop's modernization. Some walked with canes now, others with slow dignity, but their eyes still carried the weight of the promise we once made to treat aging not as decline, but as belonging. "Trent," one of them said, rising halfway from his chair. "We've heard what happened." None of us were surprised. I nodded. Sitting down across from them, "I'm not here for sympathy," I said quietly. "I'm here because it's time to reclaim what we built, not for revenge, but to protect people like Mrs. Ellis." At the mention of her name, they all grew still. Mrs. Ellis had been one of the first residents we ever cared for the heart of the original home. I remembered her laughter, the way she called me son when I'd help her adjust her blanket. It wasn't sentiment that drove me now. It was obligation. We discussed numbers, shares, board votes, and purchase windows. Every detail mattered. The Haven Bridge Foundation, on paper, was a philanthropic network focused on elder care ethics. In reality, it was a safety net, a structure I'd helped design years ago to quietly protect nonprofit facilities from corporate abuse. Now, it was time to use it. As the meeting progressed, I watched them study the charts I'd prepared. If we acquire these remaining minority holdings, I explained, we gain controlling interest. Warren's rebranding will raise our valuation just enough to fund it without him realizing we're the buyer. They exchanged glances, half skeptical, half exhilarated, across town. Warren was probably hosting his rebrand Silver Pathways celebration, clinking glasses while rehearsing the word innovation for the cameras. He had no idea that every ribbon he cut was tightening the rope around his own empire. The oldest member, Mrs. Alvarez, leaned back and whispered. He turned it into a machine. Let's give it a soul again. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Then, from the far end of the table, a young investor, one of the few new faces, picked up a pen, scanned the document, and signed. He looked at me and said with quiet conviction, I believe in you, not in Warren. For a moment, no one moved. Then I exhaled, slow and steady, the way you do when a plan finally shifts from thought to motion. Outside, the city lights came on small, deliberate sparks scattered across the glass skyline. It felt fitting. The takeover had begun, not with noise or anger, but with calm precision. The reports started to reach me one after another, small cracks at first, the kind that don't make noise until it's too late. Warren Bishop was pushing expansion faster than anyone could sustain. New contracts, new facilities, less staff. The spreadsheets looked perfect to investors, but I knew what that kind of perfection cost. Every percentage of efficiency meant someone was losing the time to care by the end of the month. The night shift budget had been halved. 2 nurses were responsible for 30 residents in a single wing. Then came the story that hit local news: an elderly man had fallen trying to reach the restroom. There had been no aide on duty. The image of that hallway, bright, sterile, empty, played over and over in my mind. That was the floor I used to walk every night before leaving my post. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized. It was Linda Tran, a nurse who'd been with Silver Pathways almost as long as I had. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Trent, I can't do it anymore. They're asking me to cover 2 shifts back to back. I watched a resident cry tonight because she had to wait an hour for help. This isn't care anymore, it's cruelty. I closed my eyes, listening to the fatigue behind her words. You've done more than anyone could, I said softly. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to stay true to what you built. There was silence, then a quiet sniffle. I just wanted you to know before I resign, when the call ended. I sat in the stillness of my apartment, the city lights glimmering through the rain-streaked window. Warren's press team had already spun the fall incident as an isolated event. He'd even doubled down, announcing a fast-track expansion plan to reassure investors. The arrogance was almost artful. But cracks have gravity. They spread, they pull, they reveal. Late that night, I received an encrypted message from an associate at Haven Bridge Board. Concerns rising. Major investors scheduling emergency review. Warren to present Monday morning. I leaned back in my chair. Monday. That gave me 72 hours. Warren thought he'd be meeting with foreign investors from an overseas fund, the same anonymous entity that had been buying up Silver Pathways stock since last quarter. He didn't know that the fund was Haven Bridge, and he certainly didn't know that I was Haven Bridge. The irony almost made me laugh. His greed had created the very opening I'd been waiting for. The faster he expanded, the more leverage he gave us. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the mountains. I glanced at my silver watch, 9:45 p.m. The ticking was steady, deliberate, like a countdown I didn't need to set. The system was cracking, not from pressure but from the hollow space where conscience used to be. The news broke before sunrise, a sudden, unscheduled audit inside Silver Pathways' financial department. The board had ordered it after growing investor concern. I knew the wording, it was my wording, drafted years ago when I built the company's internal compliance framework. Back then. The system was meant to protect patients, not to bury executives. Now, it was finally doing its job by mid-morning. The corporate office buzzed like a disturbed hive. Warren Bishop's voice echoed through the upper floor, sharp enough to cut glass. From a distance, through the muted television in my living room, I watched the live footage security at the entrance, accountants rushing in with sealed folders. My reflection overlapped the screen, calm and still. The system was running exactly as I had designed it, automatic flagging of financial inconsistencies, cross-referenced with every government grant and welfare subsidy. It didn't accuse anyone, it simply revealed the truth. By noon, the findings began leaking. Unexplained consulting fees, procurement overcharges, personal expenses disguised as client hospitality. Even the state funding that had once supported low-income residents was being redirected to brand reinvestment initiatives. That was Warren's phrase, inside the conference room. He was reportedly livid. "Who the hell designed this system?" he shouted, slamming a hand on the table. No one answered at first. Then a younger accountant, pale and trembling, whispered, "It's version 3.2, from the Callahan framework." "Sir, it's his model." The cameras caught the moment he froze, eyes narrowing, expression tight, calculating. I knew that look. He wasn't angry at the exposure, he was terrified of the permanence. Once the Callahan audit triggered, every record became state archived. There was no undo button. I leaned back in my chair, the light from the window glancing off my silver watch. The ticking was unhurried, cold, predictable, just like the process. At exactly 2:15 p.m., another story broke across a local television network. A feature titled, "The Hands That Still Care," aired a short interview with a family I remembered well. The Harrisons. Their father had been a patient during the 2013 outbreak. In the segment, their daughter held up an old photo of him smiling beside me in the ward. Her voice shook as she read their letter. If it hadn't been for Trent Callahan, our father wouldn't have survived that winter. The anchor paused. It seems the company once known for compassion may have lost sight of its purpose. Public reaction spread faster than any audit report could. Investors began pulling out, donations froze, and the hashtag #SilverWithoutSoul started trending before evening. I muted the television and stared at the city skyline. The plan was unfolding without noise, without confrontation, just exposure. Warren wanted expansion. What he got instead was revelation. I turned the watch face toward the fading light. The glass caught a sharp reflection, a clean, cold gleam. Somewhere inside that stillness, the line between justice and consequence disappeared. It was almost midnight when the message came through. A formal invitation, encrypted and marked urgent, requesting Warren Bishop's attendance at a private virtual meeting with the primary investors of Haven Bridge Foundation. The note was polite, restrained, and the kind of thing that made executives sweat. I knew he would open it immediately. From my apartment window. The city below was quiet, just a thin mist over the streets and the rhythmic hum of traffic lights cycling through empty intersections, the calm before an impact. I straightened the collar of my shirt, adjusted the small lens of my webcam, and waited for the signal to connect. Across town, Warren sat in his glass office, still in his tailored suit, eyes hollow from too many press calls. The audit had shaken him. The board demanded answers. He thought this meeting might save him, that Haven Bridge was an external investor willing to stabilize the company. He didn't realize that the foundation had already been inside Silver Pathways for months through me. The screen flickered once, then stabilized. His face appeared confident, rehearsed, the familiar corporate smile. "Good evening," he began smoothly. "I appreciate you meeting on such short notice. I'd like to personally assure." Then he froze. I let the silence stretch for a heartbeat before I spoke. "Hello? Warren?" He blinked once, twice. "Trent," his voice cracked, just enough to betray him. What is this? You don't represent Haven Bridge." "On the contrary," I said, my tone even. "I helped build it." He leaned closer to the camera, confusion fighting with fear. Behind him, the lights of downtown Denver shimmered through the glass like a mirage. You can't possibly think I don't think, I interrupted quietly. I know. For the first time since the day he fired me. I saw the mask slip. His jaw tightened, the air between us sharp and electric through the screen. This isn't over, he said finally. You have no authority here. Tomorrow morning, I replied. Calm and absolute, you'll present your defense to the board of directors. I suggest you prepare carefully. He stared at me, trying to read the angle. But there wasn't one left to read. I didn't flinch, I didn't smile. I just ended the call. The room around me fell into stillness again. Only the faint hum of my laptop and the ticking of my silver watch broke the silence. I closed the lid slowly, the reflection of the city fading from the screen. The minute hand aligned exactly with the 10. I whispered to no one. It's time. Outside, a gust of wind brushed against the window pane, carrying the faint echo of church bells in the distance, somewhere across the city. Warren Bishop was staring into a dark screen, realizing that his savior had just become his reckoning. By morning, the silence that had hung over the company for weeks finally broke, and it broke loud. Every news outlet from Denver to Chicago was running the same headline, Silver Pathways Under Federal Investigation for Patient Data Misuse. My phone buzzed nonstop, filled with alerts, forwarded articles, and anonymous calls I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Everything that was supposed to happen was happening. Reporters crowded outside the corporate headquarters. The footage played across every screen in town, panicked employees being ushered through glass doors, security scrambling to block cameras, and Warren Bishop storming out of a black car, his tie crooked, his composure gone. The man who once spoke in polished phrases now shouted in fragments, "Who leaked this? Who did it?" No one answered. They didn't have to. The truth had found its own way out. I watched from a distance, standing across the street near the plaza fountain. The wind carried the sound of shouting, but it felt far away, like a scene behind glass. Through the front gates, I could see workers on ladders removing the brushed steel letters that spelled Silver Pathways from the main building's facade. The bolts squealed as they turned, one by one, until the last letter fell with a dull metallic thud. For 15 years. I had built that name. I'd seen it printed on patient reports, stitched on uniforms, carved into wooden plaques. Watching it come down should have hurt. Instead, I felt a strange calm, like witnessing a fever finally break, inside the facility. Warren moved from room to room, barking orders that no one obeyed. I heard later he'd called an emergency board meeting, demanding to confront whoever had betrayed him. He thought this was still about control. It wasn't. It was about consequence. When I finally entered the building, the hallway was lined with staff whispering into their phones, some crying, some relieved. The company logo had already been replaced on the internal displays, a blue bridge arching over Silver Light Haven Bridge Foundation. The elevator opened onto the top floor. The conference room door was ajar, voices inside sharp and nervous. Warren stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence, his knuckles white against the wood. The moment he saw me, the words died in his throat. I stepped forward, the ticking of my silver watch faint but steady. My chair from years ago had been replaced, but the seat at the center remained the one marked chairman. His eyes followed mine as I set my briefcase down and took that chair. The new nameplate gleamed under the morning light, Chairman Trent Callahan. Warren didn't speak. He didn't need to. Outside. The cameras still rolled, capturing the collapse of a company and the quiet rise of something better. I touched the watch again. The hour hand had stopped moving, but for the first time. Everything else had begun. The boardroom was thick with silence, the kind that hums in your ears when no one dares to breathe. The blinds were half drawn, muting the sunlight into cold strips across the table. Every seat was filled, every face tense. Warren Bishop stood at the head, shoulders rigid, his voice trembling between outrage and desperation. "He doesn't belong here." He barked, gesturing toward me. "He's a former employee, nothing more." For a moment, no one replied. Then Margaret Alvarez, the oldest board member, spoke softly, her words slicing through the air. "Number Warren, He's not an employee. He's the majority owner. The color drained from his face, his mouth opened, but nothing came out. I could see the realization land slow, heavy, final. The paper trail, the shares, the signatures, all of it had led here. I rose slowly from my seat, letting the weight of the moment settle before speaking. "You know, Warren," I said, my tone calm but unwavering. "When you stopped seeing people and only saw profit margins, that was the day you lost this company. You just didn't notice it yet." The room stayed silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling vent. Warren stared at me like a man trying to find a ledge that wasn't there. The board members exchanged quiet glances, their decision already made. "Mr. Bishop," one of them said, sliding a folder across the table, "the board has voted unanimously. You're to sign your resignation effective immediately." He didn't move at first. His fingers twitched, then gripped the pen tightly. For years, he'd signed contracts, partnerships, and dismissals without hesitation. But now, as his name hovered over the line, his hand began to shake. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. When he finally pressed the pen down, the tip scratched louder than it should have. The ink bled slightly through the paper. He paused halfway, exhaling through clenched teeth, then finished his name in a jagged sweep. The paper slid back toward the board. A lifetime of authority ended in 4 inches of signature. He looked up at me, anger flickering into something closer to confusion. "How long?" "Trent," he asked quietly, "how long have you been planning this?" I didn't look away. "Since the day I saw you walk past Mrs. Ellis without stopping." I said. He frowned, searching his memory. He probably didn't even remember her, the woman who'd given me my silver watch, the one who called the staff her family. But I remembered, and so did everyone who still believed in what Silver Pathways used to stand for. I picked up the signed document and placed it gently into my briefcase. The room felt lighter, as if years of false polish had been peeled away. Warren sank back into his chair, his empire finally silent. Outside, the faint sound of laughter drifted up from the courtyard below. Residents, nurses, people. The company was breathing again. 2 months later. The building no longer looked like the place I'd left behind. The old corporate banners were gone, replaced by clean white walls and soft blue signage. The new name, Haven Path, hung above the entrance, carved into brushed metal. It wasn't a brand anymore. It was a promise. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and linen instead of disinfectant. The staff had returned, not because of bonuses or promotions, but because they wanted to. Laughter drifted down the corridors where tension once lived. Every few steps, I caught glimpses of small, ordinary miracles: 2 residents playing chess, a nurse humming while adjusting a blanket, sunlight falling across a polished floor. As I walked, a quiet pride settled in. This was what it was always supposed to be. The board had voted unanimously to convert Silver Pathways into a non-profit, funded by the Haven Bridge Foundation. The investors had been replaced by caretakers, the quarterly targets by patient well-being, for the first time in years. There were no shareholders, only people. Down one hallway. I paused by a new plaque mounted beside the lobby door. The words were simple, etched into steel. "This company belongs to the people it serves." I ran my fingers across the letters, feeling the grooves beneath my hand. It wasn't a victory lap, it was a closing of a circle. The greed, the betrayal, the noise it had all quieted into something honest. A young nurse approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. She smiled shyly. "People keep saying the founder's back," she said. "Is it true?" I took the cup from her and smiled faintly. "Something like that." She laughed softly before walking away. I looked down at my silver watch, the same one Mrs. Ellis had given me years ago. The hour hand, once frozen, was moving again. Steady, calm, alive. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, hitting the plaque and scattering reflections across the hallway. For a moment, everything glowed: the walls, the floors, the faces passing by. It wasn't just a new beginning, it was the quiet return of purpose. And standing there, in the company reborn from its own ruin, I understood sometimes restoration doesn't roar. It breathes, in the end. I realized restoration isn't about reclaiming power. It's about giving it back. What was once driven by numbers became a place of names, laughter, and dignity. Every repaired room, every patient smile, reminded me that compassion outlasts ambition. So wherever you're listening from, if you've ever rebuilt something that was taken from, this your quiet persistence matters. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story below, because every act of courage, no matter how small, echoes further than we imagine.